Hey there, welcome to the Mental Perk podcast, where we focus on real people, real issues, and real talk. Mental Perk is brought to you by the Hanna4Hope Foundation. I'm Carla Hutcherson, a licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandy Patterson, an executive board member for Hanna4Hope.
We are here to talk about mental health, whether it's daily stress, academic pressure, relationship issues, or maybe losing a loved one. Also, like managing a diagnosis or suicidal and self-harm behaviors. We want this to be a space of non-judgment, honest talk, and destigmatizing mental health issues.
Today, we'd like to introduce you to the founders of Hanna4Hope Foundation, Tim and Raina Clark. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Well, thank y'all for coming. We're so happy that you guys are going to be our first podcast guest and really help us to understand what all this is about.
Tim, Raina, I want to ask you a question. How did you guys come to start the Hanna4Hope Foundation?
It started with, soon after we lost our daughter, Hannah, to suicide. We felt like it just needed to be brought out more, educated more, and bring out awareness, because as parents, we had no idea that was something we needed to educate her and talk to our daughter about.
Can you tell us a little bit about Hannah? Give us a story, the background of Hannah. You know, what was she like as a child and adolescent?
Hannah was, just like any other teenager. She was bubbly, outgoing. She loved playing volleyball. But in the same context, she also was quiet. She liked to be by herself quite a bit. Just typical teenage stuff.
So, tell us a little bit about what you knew about adolescent suicide and mental health before Hannah took her life.
Honestly, we didn't know anything. We didn't know that was something that needed to be discussed. I mean, as a parent, I need to talk to Hannah regarding, when she reached high school, about sex and drugs and alcohol, things of that nature, but had no idea that was teenage suicide would be a topic that needed to be addressed. Had no idea.
Had you ever heard of anyone committing suicide that was a teenager before Hannah?
No, I didn't even experience that as myself growing up. And I don't think, Tim, you did you?
No, that was something that, you never even thought about.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even have a family member, and neither did he. I mean, and like Hannah experienced the teenage stuff, as far as attitude and kind of just having, I would talk to other parents about it, and they're like, oh, that's normal, she'll come back to you because daddy could do no wrong, but mama at this point she was distancing herself from me. So, but never in our wildest dreams did we think that was something that needed to be talked to.
Raina, Tim, tell me about what it was like the days, weeks, months following Hannah's death. I mean, what brought you to the side of advocacy, and how did you process your grief?
Well, it was, of course, days after, probably weeks after. It was suffocating. It was overwhelming. It was, I can't even describe, what we went through. Of course, there was, the James and Robin Strode, they kind of took us under their wings. They were angels from heaven that come in, and they helped us, just by being around, talking to us, not talking to us, just being there. That helped us quite a bit. And then just, over time, you just kind of get a little bit better. But the initial few weeks was pretty bad.
I think I felt more numbness, like I was in a nightmare that soon I would wake up and it would just be all over, and it really didn't happen or wasn't really going on. Denial. That's probably the first instinct or the stuff that I felt, but then it became, as a parent, guilt, shame, a failure. We were supposed to protect Hannah, and we felt like we didn't do that. Plus, we didn't have the knowledge of what we needed to know. to help prevent that. You just go through a whole lot of different emotions when you lose a child to suicide than if you lose a child to an accident or an illness. And so it took a lot of soul searching and leaning, like Tim said, on our family and friends to help us get through that. It took, I would say, probably a couple of years where we finally found a faith-based counseling group, grieving group, and it strictly touched on people who've lost loved ones to suicide. But what helped was that we could relate to everyone in that room. And to me, that made a huge difference because I didn't feel like I was completely losing my mind or the thoughts that were entering my mind were completely wrong. That was normal. And it was faith-based. And I think that tremendously is what helped us get through of losing our daughter, because you don't have hope. I don't know how you get through this.
That's so true.
It really is. And I was going to kind of go back to what we were talking about just a second ago, because this is so powerful what you're saying. But, we at Hanna4Hope, we talk about teaching kids and teachers and educators, how to understand risk factors and protective factors. So, and as a parent, you hear that. You hear people normalizing a child's behavior or say, oh, that's just a typical adolescent. That's a typical adolescent. But if you look back, do you see any risk factors that maybe Hanna had in store, like that, or things that you saw and maybe you didn't, at that time, maybe didn't see that could be a risk factor?
I think Tim had realized that there was a night or two that he would wake up and Hanna wasn't sleeping. I think that was the main thing that I didn't realize that could be a sign to what was going on more deeply inside her.
Yeah, lots of times she'd just be real quiet. I recall the night before Hanna passed. We took turns taking her to volleyball practice. It was my night to take her to volleyball practice in Plano, and she was just really, really, really super quiet. She didn't really say much. So I just assumed something was on her mind. Of course, you'd try and talk to her, get something out of her, and, she would, her typical, hey, I'm fine, no, nothing's wrong. But I watched her, in volleyball practice, and she was laughing and cutting up, having a good time. But, again, on the way back home, she was super quiet, never said a word. And I just thought, there are a couple of things, it's typical teenager stuff, but also I thought, something's wrong. Something's bothering her, and I just couldn't get it out of her. And I recall that night lots of times because I thought, well, if I could have got something out of her, maybe talk to her, but it stems back to just typical teenage stuff.
Yeah, and that's so hard to kind of figure out. Is this typical teenage stuff? Is this something that we really need to be focused on? Will this pass? And so that's the hardest part, I think, as parents, is trying to really read your kid and really know what's going on.
When you talk about suicide in the same context as mental health, before Hanna committed suicide, I speak for myself. I never even thought about mental health, and I sure didn't think about suicide. But I never took those two and combined them together, and meaning the same problems. Mental health can cause suicide until after Hanna's passing.
Yeah, and I think, Tim, one thing that sticks out in my mind when I've talked to both you and Raina is, we talk about Hanna's suicide kind of being a result of, a boyfriend breakup. Do you feel like that there was more to it? Do you feel like there was some underlying mental health issues? Do you feel like that there was something that maybe it just was so hard to see? Because I know as a mental health professional, a lot of times kids aren't really good at communicating what's really going on inside of their heads and thoughts.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the initial part of after Hannah's passing, I thought, well, she took her life because of a breakup of a boyfriend. But, and that's what's so great about Hanna4Hope is after, education and learning signs and symptoms of mental health and so on, I think I've come to the conclusion that Hannah might have had some underlying factors in there, calls for mental health, that went to the next step. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Raina, tell me, Tim and Raina, what was it like? How did people treat you after Hannah passed away? Was it awkward? Was it normal? Tell us what it was like.
I think for the most part, our closest friends and family, they just surrounded us and wrapped their arms around us and did the best to be there for us. Did people treat us differently? Maybe a little bit, but that could have been just me thinking that, me being paranoid. Me being paranoid, because for the longest time, I felt like my identity now had changed. I wasn't just anybody that just would walk into a grocery store or run an errand. I was paranoid that anybody in there, if I caught them staring at me, all they knew was that's Hannah's mom, the one that committed, like that, my identity had changed. I think there might have been some people not knowing what to say or how to react to me, but then at the same time, I've had people that did come up to me and just that, you don't know me, but my daughter knew your daughter, and I just got to give you a hug. I mean, that happened to me a couple times. So I don't know. It's like I said, I think it might have been, to be honest with you, it took a couple years for me to go to the grocery store by myself. I mean, Tim had to go with me every time. I just could not, and I still have never walked into that Walmart again, where we were when Hannah.
Yeah, you've never been back to the Walmart.
No, so
that's pretty powerful. And grief happens in so many different ways. People handle grief in so many different ways.
I think it was actually Tim. I mean, honestly, when we lost Hannah, I'm in my own grieving world, but he then took the role of, I got to have answers to why this happened and so he ended up reading and doing a lot of researching and on statistics and facts about it. And then when we were just talking, to our friends, honestly, I also just remember and Brandy and I have shared this story multiple times, but it after thank you cards all went out and everything, I remember getting a thank you card back for a thank you card from previous daughter. And I remember exactly where I was, just laying on the couch, and reading this letter and just laughing. And Tim's looking at me like, what are you laughing at? And I read him the letter. And the next thing I know is just, I'm making the phone call, and Brandy and I are meeting for coffee at Starbucks. And I don't even know how long we were there, but it started. It just began. It was after we got to talking and talking about, it was, as a parent, Tim and I already were suffering through the guilt of being, as it happened, because we were thinking it was our fault. We missed something, But at the same time, there was a lot of errors and a lot of different people. The school district, I think, had dropped the ball a little bit. Friends not realizing, because they didn't know, they're kids, but everyone that had touched Hannah that day, she didn't get the help she needed, and we failed her, and in our conversation, I just felt like with Tim and our friends and family, something needed to be done. It's done. We need to, unfortunately, we're in a decade where we need to start talking about suicide. This needs to be brought up. more and educated more to our community and beyond, because no other person needed to go through losing a child in this tragic way.
How was your marriage affected after Hannah's death, Tim and Raina? Tell us about that.
You know what? It's funny that you asked that, because I've been thinking about this. Of course, you can imagine how Raina felt. Then, I started diving into research on why, how, where, all this stuff, what to do, everything. What happens to 90% of marriages, they get a divorce after they lose a child. So I remember going to Raina and I said, look, we're not going to let this beat us. We're not going to let the devil get in here and take our marriage away. So we're going to fight this. And I remember sitting in the backyard with James and Robin Schroed, and we felt like we needed to do something. And we need to save our marriage, and we need to make a difference, or we're going to get in trouble real quick. And Hanna4Hope was started, just talked about. When we got started with Hanna4Hope, it made a difference in Raina. It gave her a purpose. And, she took the bull by the horns, and it just took off. And that really kind of saved us, because it gave us a purpose to do something, to make a difference. And we knew that Hannah's passing was not in vain.
That's pretty powerful. It sounds like your faith has been kind of the backbone of how you've processed your grief and how you've, found a way to continue to move forward.
It's the only thing that got us past all this. We serve a risen God, and He's been with us through all this, and never at one time did we ever say blame God for this. There was numerous times we reached out and asked God to help us, and He has.
He made us stronger by all means. I mean, to me, I think if you can survive something like this, then you can survive anything.
Yeah, it's so true.
I was living in an RV for a year.
Living in an RV. Well, we're going to let you tell that story here in just a little bit when we talk about the future. So I do want to ask a little bit, because this is so important, and I know that your faith has brought you through a lot, but there's a lot of parents out there who have lost a child by suicide, and maybe they don't have that connection to their faith. What experience or help can you offer parents who are suffering through their child's suicide or suicide attempt?
I think it's taking one day at a time, but I really truly believe that if you can talk to and talk to someone that can relate to you. But I mean, I think that is key. You're already dealing with a lot of emotional feelings, after losing a child to suicide. But if you could talk to someone that actually can say, I know exactly how you feel, I just think it just helps. I mean, especially if you can't lean on God. You don't have, that belief. Just having someone that can actually stand by you and know exactly how you feel, I think that helps tremendously.
And I think when you say that, Raina, it goes to just saying that it's not just about losing a loved one, but specifically losing a child. That is so different for people to relate to. Whenever someone says, I've lost a loved one, it's when you're able to connect with those people directly that has lost a child.
Absolutely. I totally agree, Brandy. I mean, before we found that church faith, group a couple years after losing Hannah, we had went to our own church grieving group. We went to a compassionate friends, where everyone just loses children, but I couldn't get that connection. I mean, like at the church, they're talking about losing their husband for 20, 30 years, or an uncle or a sister, and I couldn't relate to that. I'm not saying that their loss is not any less important. I'm just saying I couldn't relate to how they were feeling because I had lost Hannah, my daughter, but also to suicide, and then Compassionate Friends. Yes, they all lost children, but it might have been through illness or accident. And then I didn't feel like at the time, hope, and I needed that too. I felt like that if without the faith, it just took me 2 steps back and not forward.
Raina, you touched on something that I think is really important, in addressing in suicide, and there's a stigma associated with suicide. Was that hard for you when you talked about that, or did people look at you differently, or did they react differently than if your child had died by an illness or an accident?
I think so. I think there are some people who are very uncomfortable with that topic, just that word and the topic of it. I think as Hanna4Hope, especially being more involved in schools, I think there's still schools out there that have, administrators that actually still believe that if you talk about suicide, then you're actually bringing it into the kid's head, and they don't want to talk about it. It's just very uncomfortable, or they're raised to where you don't talk about suicide.
Yeah, and I think we know through the work we do at Hanna4Hope that talking about suicide doesn't increase the risk of suicide. And I hope that, as we continue the work that we do, that we continue to let people know that, how important it is to talk about it.
So it goes back to saying, how effective do you think, since we've started the whole Hanna4Hope process, addressing adolescent mental health in these schools with suicide has been helpful for these kids?
I think we've been very effective. We've got a lot of schools that are actually, it's on our calendar every year. So evidently we have, helped educate and bring awareness into their schools. And, we have a great program. I think my thing is what we need to think about is that we talk to our kids about sex, drugs, alcohol. We're educating them on those factors. We're not telling them to go out there and try the alcohol, to do the drugs, or to have sex. We're educating. It's the same thing with suicide. We're not telling them to make that horrific decision. We're educating them and letting them bring awareness so that they can get the help that they need when they feel like they're struggling or going through something. And why not educate them?
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I think that, the more we talk about it, I think the more awareness we bring to this issue, the more lives we can save. And that's why I truly believe in the work that we're doing at Hanna4Hope. We're teaching kids in their schools how to be first responders, how to notice kids who are at risk and who are struggling, and then what to do, what are those next steps. And nothing can be more powerful than teaching kids how to notice other kids who are struggling.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that was another reason why Tim and I, when we were, creating Hanna4Hope, that was one of our main goals. We go back to that day on April 25th. He drops her off at school and real early because she had volleyball practice. Well, she's there she gets dropped off I think it was 6 or 6:30, and then she's there until about 3:30. But all day, you can definitely tell she's struggling with something. She shows signs of being upset. She's very isolating herself from everybody. And 3 teachers, her friends, everyone tried to help her, but of course she kept herself very isolated and responded like, I'm okay, or I'm fine. No one had a plan. No one knew what to do. And I think at first, I was thinking that school should have had some type of protocol or policy set in place, but where, if that wasn't typical for Hannah, first of all. I mean, she didn't go to school crying all day. She wasn't drama, but that was very unusual for her to be acting that way. So I felt like at the time, why didn't Hannah's name get popped onto it, sent to a counselor's list, or sent to the office or some sort, and to where by sixth or seventh period, when that teacher finally asked her again, if she was okay, he would have noticed this has been going on all day. We need to pull her out. We need to notify parents. There's something going on here. And that was something that I really felt like every school should have something structured. I know they have a lot of stuff going on. And I know that, there's a few teachers and a lot of students, but I feel like there should be something set in place in that area. But at the same time, why aren't we educating our kids to be that other resource to help those grown-ups as well inside the school?
These kids know what's going on with their friends and with their peers before anybody else does. They're on social media.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy how much they know, but maybe they don't know what to do with that information once they learn about it.
And I think we've seen Carla firsthand and Raina going to these assemblies and just seeing these kids. It's like you said, Raina, any other assembly you do about drug education or sexual education, when we get up there and speak to these kids about suicide awareness, it's not just suicide we're talking about. It's all the things that have led up to that moment in their life. And I think Carla is so effective when she gets up there and she speaks about that topic to where kids are actually, you see their eyes kind of open up and they really tend to receive the information we're giving them as if they've never, and it's amazing to me, Carla, and I'm sure you too, Raina, how many kids raise their hand when we ask the question, how many of you have had your parents speak to you about suicide? And it's literally shocking to see that we don't get to see as many hands go up as we should when it comes to drugs or anything else related to life that these kids go through.
It's very telling when we ask that question and you just see maybe one or two hands go up in an audience of 800 kids.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Very impactful. It's also very impactful when you ask the question, how many of you have lost someone to suicide? There's more out there than you would think.
It is actually shocking, and I think the most rewarding thing, Raina, and you can agree with this, is how many kids, when they have these assemblies, they walk away with that hope of knowing that they have an outlet now, that these parents and these that attend these assemblies and even the teachers just walk away knowing that they can speak to someone.
Yes, it's so rewarding when you even have someone that comes up and gives you a hug and says, thank you.
It is. I remember specifically, Tim, I'm sure you could go back to this one. Tim, can you tell the story of that young man that came up to you in, I want to say, Sulphur Springs and had talked about, man, I wish you would have been here a year before. Do you remember that story of that young man that came up and gave you that hug?
It's Brandy and Carla, what you're talking about. On the other side of that, what makes me upset is, at these school districts and you give that presentation and then kids raise their hands or what's more impactful than that is after the assembly, 2 or 3 kids will come up to you, just like you're talking about, Brandy, and say something, or a counselor will come up to you and say, hey, we had to pull this kid out of class or during the assembly because they were upset, da-da-da. But on the other side of that, what's disturbing to me is there's schools out there and they've experienced suicide, but they don't want to take on the responsibility of having a organization come in and speak to their kids or speak to the school about what's happening in their school. And that's what's so aggravating to us.
And that's interesting you say that, Tim, because my question to you is, do you feel like it's more the administration that is trying to avoid the topic, or do you think it's the pressure of the parents on the administration that keeps them from wanting to allow these type assemblies into their schools?
That's a good question. I firmly believe it's the administration.
Yeah.
But, the parents could have a say so in the matter too, I guess. I don't know. But I do believe that administration needs to take on the responsibility no matter what the parents.
It is very tough to hear because I have to say, just as part of Hanna4Hope, some of the most rewarding moments of the organization is when we finish a presentation and we get feedback from a school how a child's life was saved because they felt comfortable opening up to a trusted adult after they heard our presentation.
Absolutely, Carla. It's the most rewarding thing, the feedback that we get after our presentations. But I go back to even the teen committee. Brandy, how many times did we help our teens? And the rewards that they received, knowing that they were helping someone in their class or someone they knew because they knew they were part of the Hanna4Hope Teen Committee. Well, it gave them a purpose.
It did, and it opened up the dialogue for them, including my own children, to be able to speak about subjects and topics that made them feel the way that Hannah might have felt. And it's just, we need to remove the stigma of the things that lead up to this. Let these kids feel open and okay to be able to talk about whatever makes them feel the way they feel without judgment. So with that, I want to talk to you guys. We're approaching 10 years of this foundation being formed. And you hear that crowd? And I want to talk about what's it been like Hanna4Hope changed and developed over the last 10 years. Give us some information on that, guys.
Well, I mean, we started basically in our living room. Working out of Hannah's room, I created an office in where her room was, and gosh,
I think the game changer for us. I think the game changer for Hanna4Hope was when we got Dr. Kennard and Children's on board. That was life changing right there.
Yeah, that helped. We've had so many blessings. I mean, the foundation has had so many blessings. Brandy, you're one of them. My gosh, you put on these color splash. I mean, you got the community involved and so much there. You and your daughter.
We got Brandy in.
Yeah, and then of course Children's Health, which brought the tremendous team from the Spark program, and Carla being on that team. And then just the blessing of, our life changed. I mean, our life changed 2 years ago.
I think it went through stages. I think we started out, we knew that we needed to do something to make a change. We knew we wanted to do something so Hannah's life and her passing would not be in vain. We started there. And then Brandy walked into our lives, and she took it to another level. And then we got Dr. Kennard and Children's on board and Carla, and then we took it to another level. And since then, it's just been, I
think honestly, there's been so many doors that have opened so easily for Hanna4Hope. I mean, even just, I think of the creation of the board, at the very fundamentals of the beginning. Our board was so, had so many expertise. I mean, we had the account. I mean, it was perfect. You know what I mean? Everyone that had crossed our path made, I think that all.
Well, and the devotion and the dedication.
Yes, the passion that they had, just the Tim and I did, there's just no words. I can keep going on and on and on, but there was definitely, God wanted Hanna4Hope created, and he made it happen.
So with that, what are the big plans to celebrate the 10-year anniversary for Hanna4Hope? How do we plan on celebrating this?
I feel like Raina needs to organize a big event.
Oh my God. I'm on it, guys. In fact, as you say that, we are planning on, if you can, mark your calendars for July 14th. I think we've got something big planned around that time. So with that, though, I want to talk to you guys, just go into what would it be like as a parent of teens to know when it comes to adolescent mental health and suicide prevention, what's it like of these teens to know?
What's important for them to know? What recommendations would you give to parents as they're raising teens? What would you want them to know, or about how to raise awareness?
I think you unfortunately need to start early. Gosh.
Conversation. You got to have
Yeah, communication. Watch out their phones. Put a limit on their phones and social media accounts. But I mean, if they start isolating themselves, you might have to just, I don't know, lock them in a room with you until they can't go out until you get there, until they open up.
I think that's probably our biggest regret is communication with Hannah. We just didn't communicate with her like we should have.
Yeah.
I tied her down. I would have tied her down.
And I hear you. I hear that. I hear parents saying those things all the time. And it's such a challenge raising kids these days with social media and internet and phones that can access the whole world. And you don't know what's at your kids' fingertips all the time. It's hard to keep track of that all the time.
It is. It is. I mean, and I think about just that first year, of high school. I mean, that is, I really, really wish I would have paid more attention. There's a lot of changes going on with them anyway. I mean, they're going into high school, but at the same time, there's the schools hot harder. It's a lot more kids all crammed in one big building. So yeah, I definitely think that it just pay attention and then keep the communication lines open.
Yeah, and I think it's just as important too when we see that transition. Carly, you talked about going from middle school into high school. Raina, is the transition from high school to college even is such
absolutely.
a huge transition. These kids are no longer with you 24/7 like they're used to being, and so when they get off to college, I think Hanna4Hope has been so effective in planting that seed of openness and talking. Our goal is middle school through high school, so hopefully they're prepared when they get ready to go off to college. They know what to look for. They know what to hear, how to address it, who to go to.
We haven't really shared any statistics, Carla, but I think it's really important that people are aware of that. That was one of the things that was just very shocking for Tim and I. We didn't know that it was the second leading cause of death with our teams when we lost Hannah. We had no idea in the state of Texas. And didn't even think of college. In college, number one, for those 19 to 24 in the state of Texas. I mean, I think
that's one of the reasons that Mental Perk is going to be so implemental and really challenging mental health and helping people destigmatize talking about it. This is the whole idea of this platform, is we really want to get people talking about all these issues and all the things that can affect mental health, that could help us to prevent suicide, that can help us to reach more people across the lines. And so it's going to be really exciting as we start to open up some of these topics, and we're talking about them so openly over time. And so we'll be getting more into not only suicide, but also other kinds of mental health issues and how it affects people's lives, as well as those stories that people have conquered this and that they're living their lives as fully as they possibly can in the best way possible. So there's so much hope to bring out, and that's what we really want to do here at Mental Perk and the Hanna4Hope Foundation.
You're doing a fabulous job.
Well, y'all are so sweet, and we love you so much. Hey, I do want to personalize this just a little bit. I just want to kind of know what you guys are doing now, since Hanna4Hope has really started to take off, and you've got a little more free time. What are your plans for the future, and what roles do you plan to play at Hanna4Hope?
Well, we hope that Hanna4Hope continues to grow. Carla, you're doing an amazing job taking on. I mean, we're out of a living room and in a actual Dallas office building, which
Yay.
I think is amazing. Yes. And we're getting more.
These buttons are so much fun.
The studio audience is good.
Cool. I think right now, Tim and I are actually out of Rockwall, and we're living out in the country. We got out of the city, and we're living in the country, and new job, new home. We're really enjoying ourselves here in Comanche. But we still are we're very involved still with Hanna4Hope. We'd like to kind of know what's going on. We didn't want to just say we're not Hanna4Hope anymore. We are.
But when I knew that when we handed the ball off to Carla that Hanna4Hope was going to
Be taken care of.
be taken care of. It was going to grow. We wasn't concerned about it going downhill. We knew that it would do great, but we decided to just stay in the background.
Yeah. I think it's also amazing. You talked about it's going to be 10 years. The 10 years for Hanna4Hope. It's amazing how wonderful and amazing the organization and what we do, but the people that are still involved since the very beginning. I mean, that tells you right now what a wonderful organization we have. I mean, Brainy, you're one, the Schroeds, there are a lot of people who have stayed true to the organization since the very beginning. And that just tells you what kind of people we have.
That is so true. I mean, it takes you to the next level, just like Tim was said, and Carla. All these different phases our foundation's gone through, and now it's in Carla's hands, and it's going to grow in ways that we never could have imagined because of what she's taking it to and what she's doing with it. So, such a blessing. Such a blessing.
Yeah, I think we've all been blessed by the development of Hanna4Hope and the power that it has and the message that it has. I think we've all been blessed by that. Is there any certain blessings that you can recall or that you feel like, this has really changed our lives?
Say that again. We kind of had a cat issue minute.
Oh. We love cats. They give us a great reason for living. But yeah, I was just saying, we've all been blessed by the existence of Hanna4Hope and the development of Hanna4Hope and what it's doing. What are some specific blessings that you guys have received?
Hearing stories, the kids that'll, at these assemblies, for example, the kids that'll, stop and say, hey, thank you. You saved my life, or, something to that effect. The events that ran, the color splashes, man, what a blessing that was. That was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That in our own community, that so many people come out to support us and support the foundation. And that was an incredible run right there.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Just the rewarding feeling of knowing we're helping another team. Helping somebody, even if it's another parent, me talking to parents, but knowing that somehow I'm able to help them get through or get the help they need, that's the most rewarding thing. And knowing that, or we're teaching that team, to be that friend, that as a friend that's struggling, just hearing those stories, that's the most rewarding thing for me. And that's what keeps us wanting Hanna4Hope to still continue to grow.
Yeah, we've talked about a very serious topic today of suicide. We've talked some about mental health, but I really want to focus on suicide and how important it is and how much, if anyone out in the audience is struggling with suicidal thoughts or feeling depressed or feeling hopeless, that we want you to know there's hope. You don't have to be alone in this. Most importantly, the best thing that you could do is know it's okay to talk about it. And if you're out there and you see someone struggling, it's okay to ask about it. The more we talk about it, the more lives we save. So making sure that if you're struggling today with any mental health issues, if you're having suicidal thoughts, please know, I want you to reach out to someone who's on your support team, somebody who you work with, somebody who you go to school with. There's a trusted adult out there. If you don't have anyone right off the bat that you can talk to, I want you to call the National Suicide Hotline so that they can get help coming your way. And that number is 988. And if you're in immediate danger or if you're having active suicidal thoughts, please call 911 so that we can make sure that you're taken care of and that you're protected.
Tim and Raina, we want to thank you so much for being guests on our show today. We appreciate you so much, and we're so thankful for all you have to offer this foundation.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, we are so excited that y'all joined us and opened up our first podcast with talking about the Hanna4Hope Foundation and what you have been through as parents, and sharing that with others so that they also realize the importance of talking about this issue. We also want our audience to know how important you are and that every one of you matter, and you're never alone.